Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Renee. I am so excited.
I am excited to have you here because all these years, I thought blogging was dead. Now, hear me out. It was like in 2020, I was listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast, and she said that podcasting is the new blogging. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh God, it's so easy. Let's just start a podcast. You record yourself into a microphone, and then you put it on the internet, and it's that easy. But as you know, being a podcaster yourself, it is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I think, let me just look at my document here. When this episode goes live, you're going to be around episode like 240 something or yeah. And that's 4 years of podcasting. I put in the reps.
I totally hear you. I podcaster of now 8 years. So I understand. I know it's insane, but I think when we think of not blogging being dead, it's not a matter of blogging now. It's the blogging from 2009, 2010, 2011. That is dead. The blogging where people used to put out content, and the content they were putting out was what they ate that day or what trip they took their kids on. And it wasn't really blogging. It was what we put on social media now. The blogging of today has to be strategic. It has to have keyword research that goes into it, answering a problem, because the purpose of a blog is to get found by your ideal audience because you're solving the problem that they have. So to answer your question, no, blogging is not dead, but the blogging from 10, 15 years ago certainly is.
I was going to ask, I know that's when it was, if you had like a slight social media or SEO strategy and you put out content on a weekly basis, you could rank. Now the competition is crazy. However, I never want to discourage people because when you put in the reps and you create that momentum and you push out content, whether it's social, podcast, blogging, eventually, if you're doing it right, things will start to attract more readers, more viewers to your website, downloads, likes, you name it. Yes. So now if you're looking back at 2009, 2010 to today, 2024, what are the big trends that are actually working for businesses today?
Yes. So I think the biggest thing is having their marketing all in line where they actually have it set up. So they're answering a problem. They solve the problem by getting someone an opt-in, something free to be able to get onto their list. Then from there, they engage with them via their list, as well as continuing to market with them via social media, where it's more about getting to know you and who you are and that sense of like, no trust to build so that you then can offer your product or service through your email, through your funnels.
Okay. So this has been a point of contention for me because all the people that are in the blogging space that are really good at email marketing always say, like even Amy Porterfield, Jenna Kutcher, they say, just grow your email list. So then we put in this effort into creating these lead magnets, these downloadable nuggets. Yeah. And it's kind of like, now what? How often do I email my list? What do I say? How long do these emails? Like most people get stuck there. They'll do it for a couple weeks or a couple months. And then they're like, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. What is the best practice for getting started in this?
Yes. So when you are emailing your people, there's two ways that you want to look at it. You want to look at it as this is the perfect way to get your products and services, what you offer in front of them. Instead of trying to sell via Instagram and do it via direct message, now instead you're going to have them in your inbox. The conversion rate is so much higher than it is on social media because you're not fighting algorithms to actually get seen. So one way that you want to make sure that you're using email is to let your people know that you have products and services and how they can get signed up for that. If they get value from that free opt-in that you gave them, they're going to want to know more about what it is that you offer and to come stronger into your world. Now, as far as continuing to engage them, I recommend at a minimum, you're emailing them once a week. I email my list 3 times a week. And most of them don't even realize they're getting emailed 3 times a week. And a lot of people, I know what your thought is. I know people listening are going, oh my God, that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah.
But you have content. You have podcast episodes. You said you had over 280 podcast episodes that you already have, Renee. why not get that old content back in front of them? It's still relevant. You're a genius when you speak. Why not give them those nuggets again? So as someone that has content from the past, I will email them what's relevant now, and I will get that in front of them. My emails are 4 to 6 sentences max with one link. And I'm sending them to a valuable piece of content when it comes to a podcast episode. So I'll start off by asking a question. Are you struggling with your productivity? Are you feeling like you're spinning a ton of plates and can't get anything done? Here's a great strategy for you where you can actually batch your content and be able to get started. Find out more here. And it just has a button that then goes out to that podcast episode. Now, here's the thing. All of my readers that are on my email are not just podcast listeners. Some of them are readers. So it goes to a blog post that has the podcast audio embedded. So if you're a YouTuber, take your YouTube video, turn it into a blog post, embed the YouTube video, and let your readers go to that blog post of the YouTube video that gives them all of the information. And then you're ranking not only in YouTube, but also potentially on Google for that keyword for the problem that you were solving with that.
So how much of your content is reshared? Like I know there's repurposing, but in your emails, is there something that you're pretty much just slapping on a few new words and then you're resharing it 6 months later?
Yes, absolutely. My content, some of my people on my list, depending upon how long they've been there, have probably seen the same blog post, podcast episode 3-4 times at least, because it's such valuable content. When I know my people are struggling with something, let's say keywords in particular, or that I know that at the beginning of the year, they want to hear everything about productivity, I'm pulling all of that nuggets, all of that great information and making it relevant to them when they are revisiting that problem.
Okay. So I know a lot of people overthink content. The way that we do it is we start with the podcast as kind of the foundation for the content we're going to create. So this video will become shorts, TikToks, reels. You'll get your own little solo clip I'll get my solo clip, and then there'll be one with us together. This gets posted as a full-length video on YouTube as well. And then it gets shared and distributed across all the podcasting platforms as well as social. And let me tell you, when you get the people and the system set up, it gets a lot easier. But there's still a lot to do at the beginning, which is where people get the most intimidated. So think about all the things that you just said is you have content you've already created over years, 8 years of podcasting and however long you've been blogging. I don't want to say it's easier for you, but now you get to like pick and choose what's going to be either repurposed or reshared or something fresh and new. What is the best way to do this for somebody who's just starting out? And we're going to say, let's just say you're a coach or a consultant and you don't have a lot of content and you're a terrible writer, intimidated by the process. Where do they start? What do they do?
So my recommendation is always you have to pick one platform where you're going to be consistent. You can't try to do every single platform. And my biggest, I guess, pet peeve suggestion sort of would be you can't build your business on rented property. And that's exactly what social media is. So if you're solely saying, oh, I'm just going to do TikTok, figure out a way that you are going to repurpose that TikTok into something that is your own. And when I say your own, I mean YouTube, podcast, and blog. Those are the 3 that you more or less own. Yes, YouTube is kind of a social media platform, but it's also owned by Google. And I'm going to do what the Google gods tell me to do in order to get eyes on my content. So those would be the 3 that I recommend. And personally, I'm the same way. Podcast is where I'm consistent. Every single week for 8 years, I've put out an episode because it's easy for me to talk. And then I have, say that again.
How many episodes are you at?
Well, I think we'll publish 380 next week. I think I have you as an interview coming up soon.
Tomorrow morning at like 7 a.m. my time. We're so funny. Just get it done, right?
Yes, but because It's that habit of always doing something. It's like working out. If you're consistent with working out, you're going to be in really good shape. It's when you start to change the way that you do things and try to make it fit into, just be consistent. Consistency is the easiest thing to follow.
Yeah, I say consistency is your currency.
Yes.
It is the thing that's going to put you over that threshold. It's going to get you across the finish line. Okay, but I like the buts. You're really good at this. How long do people have to dedicate to that consistent action in one domain before they actually still know that it's the thing that's going to work for them?
So I think you have to feel like you know your people. I always say, because one of the things that people come to me about is wanting to learn how to do sponsorships with brands. And they always say, how many followers do I need to have in order to do that? And I always look at them and go, it's not about the followers. It's about, do you know your people? It can't just be your mom, your sister, and your best friend looking at whatever content. You have to be able to tell me who your people are. Give me an avatar. Give me an idea of your demographics. Where do they shop? What age range are they? What are they coming to you for? Once you can answer that, that's when you're going to feel really comfortable and confident with that platform and able potentially to add something else in and even possibly have a system in place, ideally, to be able to hand it off to someone else on your team. So it's not always just you doing all the things.
Yeah. And one thing I really urge people to do in this moment is as soon as they start the process, you can buy things like Loom, which allows you to screen record and video. Start creating your SOPs the moment you start creating a new process in your business so that you're reminded of everything that needs to get done. But then when you go to train the other person, it's a heck of a lot easier. They don't have to ask you questions because the videos are there, the content's there, all the answers are there, step-by-step checklist for them to execute on that task at hand. That is a game changer in business, especially when it comes to publishing shows. Like for us to publish a podcast, there's a whole series of things that need to happen for the thing to be deployed. And people who don't podcast, they don't often understand this. They think we just record and that everything magically happens. It goes through editing, it goes through approvals. All the copy needs to be written and approved. Then the stuff needs to be scheduled to social, needs to be uploaded to YouTube. All this, there's a lot that goes in to every single episode to get the word out. Not to discourage people. We have a team. We have a very easy process to follow. Everyone knows their role and their job when it's time come to publish a show. And for maybe somebody just starting out, whether it's podcasting or blogging, it's just the simple steps. Then you get, when you know those really well, like the back of your own hand, and you either hire, outsource, or you add another layer. Maybe it's another social media platform, right? For people like sales professionals, LinkedIn's the place to be. Own LinkedIn like it's the only thing you know how to do. From there, expand.
Yes. And when you do it that way, you're aware when there's an algorithm change rather than not understanding how a platform works, dumping a ton of money into a specialist that you're not measuring the ROI on that specialist because you're not really quite sure how the platform actually works. So your best bet is to get in there and watch it and see it and start to get a feel for what is doing really well for you and what's falling on its face. That is honestly the best way to figure out a platform.
Okay. And then when do we know something is not working?
When you are continually not getting engagement, you're not getting people commenting, and you're not just doing it once. You have to give a strategy at least 2 to 3 weeks every day, consistently testing it out, and that's on social media. I'm not saying your blog or your podcast, because obviously if you're trying to do that every day, you're absolutely insane. That should be hopefully weekly. If you can get to that, great. But it's trying to test something and giving it some time to get some legs and to get some sort of engagement from your people.
Okay. And that takes time. I always say it's like the 100-day rule. So even for us, when we do go through our VIP days is where we create your world-class PR strategy, your media kit, defined media list, all the pitch angles. We always say, if you're going to do this VIP day, you have to commit to 100 days of execution. And we outline exactly what days to pitch, when to follow up, what time to do it, so that people can easily integrate this into their weekly schedule. And the reason why I say 100 days is because it takes that long to commit to that cycle. but also to start seeing results, especially with PR, especially with blogging and SEO. I mean, SEO, blogging, content marketing takes even longer. It takes so much longer for content to rank. And then people throw in the towel way too early.
Yes.
They're like, no. So you look at it in terms of quarters. Okay, Q1, Q2 of this year, this is what I'm focusing on. Get rid of the busy work and the other stuff, and let's see if this works. You don't have to be everything to everyone or everywhere either, because that just muddies the water. And then it just makes things more frustrating and complicated.
No, I totally agree. It's a numbers game. You have to just put it out there and continue to see what you can get as far as results.
So you were a former teacher. I don't know, maybe you still are. Or no, you retired. Okay, that's done. That ship has sailed. And you had started a blog. Was it while you were teaching or?
It was. So I was an inner city school district teacher. And I always tell people when I speak in person that I'm used to dodging chairs. So I have no problem answering questions. But that was literally the type of environment I was in. And I loved my kids. Like I could dodge a chair like no one and just keep teaching. An hour north of New York City.
Okay.
I'm originally from New York. So yes, I retired at 35. I had started blogging when I had my first daughter. So my oldest is 14 right now. When she was 6 months back in 2010, that's why I say blogging is not of 2010. That's when I started. I started a blog and it was just very what you would think of as blogging back then. You wrote about this, you wrote about that. It was just so random. And it was my way of having my own thing. Because as a new mother, I had lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. I kind of felt like this thing was just all consuming, loved her to death, but I very much had lost myself. So the blog became my way of being able to get back to my love of writing and being able to put out content and feel like I was connecting. And then from there, I found this like underworld of bloggers and went to my first conference in New York City. I went to blog her. It was ginormous. I think Martha Stewart was like the keynote speaker. It was before she went away for a little sabbatical. So, and yeah, I just continued and understood how to continue to grow because you end up in all these little groups trying to figure out what you're doing and how to grow your business, how to best monetize. And I was able to replace my teaching salary of $75,000 just from brand sponsorships. And I was never ginormous, which is very shocking to a lot of people. Like I never had over 10,000 followers on Instagram. TikTok didn't even exist. I knew my people though. And I knew how to explain
annual salary with sponsorships for your blog. How did that happen? Did you find them? Did they find you?
So in the beginning, it was a lot. I feel like, I was really trying to understand my audience. And then once I did, I started pitching them. Same way that you teach to pitch for PR, I pitched the brands. And I would find the email address for whoever was working on particular campaigns for collaborations. And I would pitch them and be able to tell them exactly who I was and what I brought to the table with my audience. And then from there, I developed long-term relationships with them.
And did you know how to pitch or did you just like figure it out?
I figured it out. I mean, I know that it's all in sales, right? It's a numbers game. That's the way I look at it. I always felt that if I could get out 100 emails, I would find 10 yeses. I would get through those no's. I knew I had to get my 90 no's. And as long as I got through 100, I was going to end up with my 10 yeses. And I always did. And the great thing is once you end up with those yeses, you just show them and you deliver. And then it becomes that long-term relationship where it can be that consistent income where you're making 5 figures a month from sponsorships.
Did they look at the analytics of your website, like the traffic and clicks? Like that must have mattered.
It did. And it was coming from me though. Like I gave all of that information. And I think that was different to them because I was willing to provide that. A lot of bloggers were very kind of trying to not talk about their numbers because it wasn't back when everyone shared everything. There weren't podcasts, right? Instagram story, no Instagram. So no one was really sharing the information of what they charged, how many views they were getting, what kind of engagement. Now you can find that information anywhere. But then I was very willing to share, like, this is what I'm seeing. I'm getting this many page views. This is a blog post that is ranking. This is how many clicks I'm getting on this post. And then for social, Pinterest was a thing then. And they wanted Pinterest and they wanted impressions. They wanted to know, how they could potentially benefit from that.
So this is so fascinating to me because with my previous agency, we started a blog, and the agency was a PR company for funded tech startups.
Okay.
And we needed to have the content match that. It attracted other people too, but it was like really kind of techie focused marketing tactics. And we were able to partner with people like Neil Patel, Column 5, like the big SEO, the big designers of the time. And we would do collaborations with them as simple as saying, hey, Neil, we would love to put your name on the cover of this next lead magnet. We'll write it, we'll edit it, we'll design it, we'll create the landing page. All you need to do is promote it. And then we'd share the leads. And it was so easy to do. So that was like our sort of sponsorship. We never actually charged people. In hindsight, we probably could have. I never understood the space. And it wasn't really like a line item for us in terms of revenue. But when do people know that they could be ready for sponsorship?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to being able to speak about your people, and you have to have something that's going to stand out to them as far as a platform. So for me, I had the blog. I got a decent amount of page views to my food blog at that time. I also had these other pieces like social media. I had an email list. I think you have to have something that's going to stand out that they're going to kind of gravitate towards. A lot of brands have gotten smart about the email list. They understand that it converts 3 to 4 times better than anything on social media. So they are starting to understand the value of different things. I mean, in sponsorships, I think that's one of the great things that I love about it is that even though I no longer have that food blog, because I sold that in 2019, I still do sponsorships. I do it to get on my podcast. I do it to sponsor my summit. When I had an in-person conference, we were using sponsors. It's taking the assets that you have as a business that could be marketed to your audience, and they would benefit from that.
Where do people go wrong in the process?
It starts with, honestly, the pitching piece is that they will try to pitch, and because they don't get an answer, they write it off as I suck. They just assume that they are the ones, that they're the problem. They're not responding because I'm too small, I'm too this, I'm too that. And that's not it at all. You have to remember that their inboxes are just as busy, if not busier than our own. And therefore, it's a process where you have to have the follow-up. You got to continue to follow up with them and get in front of them. So it really starts off with that pitching piece. And when you do pitch, being able to show them where you stand out. So if you have a platform that you've got a lot of followers or great engagement or amazing open and click-through rate on your email list, you need to talk about that. You need to make sure that that's in there. I've had students go through my course that have had as small of a following as 500 people on Instagram, and they have managed to get a sponsorship paid. Now, were they making bank with it? Not necessarily, but they were still getting paid for that content.
Yeah, I love that. And so now so comparing 2010 to today, is the sponsorship approach different? The pitch different?
The pitch isn't different. I think the biggest thing that it hasn't really changed a ton. I think the way that you put together your proposal is the biggest difference because the platforms have changed. What they're looking for is different than what they were looking for in 2010. Like 2010, we didn't even have half the platforms that we have now.
So now they want more, I'm assuming.
Yes, there's a ton more, and there's so much more data, which you can now provide them with. You can tell them impressions. You can tell them, your followers and how often they're going to interact with you, whether it's in Reels or Stories or TikTok, wherever it is.
Okay. And then coming back to the follow-up too, how many times should people follow up?
So I teach that they should follow up at least 5 times. And I recommend that you first, one of the things that I always tell people is get the Google Chrome extension Streak. It is a free extension that can go right into your Gmail account so that you can watch and see when an email is opened, if it's not opened, how many times it's been opened.
We use mailtrack.io for this. Same thing.
Okay. Yes, exactly. It's the same idea. Because if you don't know if it's not being opened, you have to have that information. Because when you go to email the next time, you want to change your subject line. You want to make sure that it's a little bit more intriguing so they're actually going to open it. You also want to know if it's not being delivered entirely.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you're pitching places, these they're younger. They're moving from company to company. So someone that you started a conversation with 6 months ago may not be there anymore. So you have to continue to follow up. And again, if you don't get a no, I don't care if you've tried 5 times. It's not right now. In 6 months, you may find the right person. So if you have a dream brand and you absolutely want to work with Aerie, continue to stay on them. Do your 5 times follow up, which is going to take at least a month and a half to follow up, because you're not following up every day. You're following up every probably 5 to 7 business days is what you're trying to do when you follow up. And then give it a little bit of a break and then try to research again what that right email is for the people that could potentially be working on campaigns.
So it's the same process in PR, except 5-time follow-up is not recommended. Some journalists only want to hear the original pitch and don't want any follow-ups. And there's actually like all these manuals about follow-up equation. And you don't want to follow up more than 2 or 3 times. And partially because I'm sure it's same with the brand sponsorships, but I believe journalists probably receive more emails. Some journalists get 1,000 emails a day during gift guide season. So yeah, just be mindful of that. The cadence. So you're saying weekly. And then how do you know that somebody would be a good fit as a sponsor?
So that is something that has not changed, in my opinion, since 2010. One of the reasons that brands would work with me, even though I was small, was because I could tell a great story. It didn't matter who it was that I was working with. If I could take it and turn it into a story and then be able to show how my audience was going to be able to connect with that, that was all that made the difference. So I can give you an example. I worked with a trash bag company that wanted me to do a 4-day trash challenge. I'm a family of 4. I have girls that just throw away tons of stuff. 4 days of a trash bag is not going to work in my house. And when they originally came to me, I was like, that's not going to work. Here's what I want to do instead. I'm going to create a Caribbean. Now, remind you, I was a food blog. I said, I'm going to create a Caribbean fish taco recipe. That is going to be the lead image. That's going to be the pin. That's going to be the reel. It's going to be all these things. And I will tell the 4-day trash challenge, but instead I'm not doing it with pictures of my trash. I'm going to say that we had these delicious Caribbean fish tacos. My youngest didn't finish it because she never finishes her food. Threw it in the garbage. We went away for a long weekend. But when we came back, the house didn't smell like Caribbean fish tacos because of the great trash bags that we had linked to whoever it was at that time, because I don't remember who the trash company was. They at first were like, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a good fit. They came back to me and followed up and said, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to test this. They not only did it go viral on Pinterest because of the image, but they came back to me a year later and bought the rights to not only the photos, but also the recipe to house on their site, on their actual website.
So something you couldn't have predicted.
Mm-mm.
And has that ever happened?
At that time, when it did happen, no. And it wasn't like very prevalent that would happen. It was kind of out of the ordinary because it's a trash bag website and now you've got recipes on it. Yeah. But they understood the connection to it all. That, yeah, people don't want to read a story about a trash challenge. Like that's my audience would have been like, nope, bye, unsubscribe, never want to hear from you again.
It goes back to know your audience.
Yes. But instead I could tell that story and connect it to them and they were there.
Okay. So many parallels in PR as well. So there are instances when you have to pitch an idea or an angle to a writer. People have to put on their creative hats, and this is why things take a long time. Right. How do you come up with those creative ideas to pitch upon a sponsor?
So it's going to depend upon your niche, and you need to think about, can I spin it and make it work for my audience? That's what I always go back to, is I have an avatar that I had created for my food blog, and it was me 5 years prior who really didn't know how to cook at the time, because that's how I started my food blogs, because I didn't know how to cook. Mm-hmm. I was just kind of showing how it can be done. And then it was also a little bit of my best friend. And my best friend has worked for MTV for years, lives right in New York, does all the things. She will tell it like it is. So I knew that if I stepped out of my line where this is appropriate, this is going to work for my audience, she would call me out on it. So every time I would create content, I always had her in mind. Will she find this relevant to her? And if she isn't, I'm not going to create it because I don't want to get yelled at.
So you're saying find that friend, the cheerleader, somebody maybe that is your ideal customer, and then just have them be the sounding board for your ideas?
You can have them be the sounding board, or if you know them well enough, which you want to, you would know if it's going to hit home with them. It's just like writing copy for them. Yeah. You want them to be able to reply back to you and say, it was like you were in my head. It's like you took the words right out of my mouth. That's how you know your audience. And that's the point that you need to be able to get to, where you feel like, I know who my people are. I know the problems they're coming to me. And that's why I say it was me from 5 years prior when I started it, because I knew the problems I was struggling with. I didn't know how to dice an onion. I didn't know the difference between kale and spinach or whatever it might have been.
Oh my gosh, always a learning curve. And most of the time too, it's just a matter of throwing the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yes.
And that's the same with pitching. Let me tell you, we could spend hours, if not weeks, crafting a pitch to pitch one person at one publication. And this is what's so discouraging, especially with what you teach too, is that you could spend all this time, great idea, great angle, you know it's good, and then you don't hear back. You follow up, you don't hear back, or they say no and they pass, and the time has passed. It's very discouraging. However, yes. What we do is we make sure that that pitch doesn't go unnoticed, and we can use a version of it for 2 or 3 other different publications. So same with you in pitching sponsorships. You can pitch the idea to somebody else if somebody said no, and reuse it and keep going.
Yeah. And I would say that a lot of times when we pitch for sponsorships, we're pitching the audience, not necessarily so much the idea. Because when we're pitching, you don't want them to turn around and go, okay, people on our team that do photography, this is what angle I want you to take. So if you are pitching something of what you're going to do, I always tell people, keep it broad. Don't get real specific about that you're going to, like food blogger, you're going to create your grandmother's apple pie recipe with a cinnamon strudel crust and dices of chocolate throughout.
Go ahead.
Because you're pitching that chocolate company though, right? If you get that specific, one, they could decide, we're past apple pie season. We don't want apple pies. We've done enough apple pie. We want pumpkin. But if you just say a fall dessert that's going to incorporate it, whatever the recipe, whatever the ingredient is, that's where you're golden.
Okay. And this also follows then the same guidelines as pitching long lead media, where you have to look 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 months out sometimes.
Yes.
What does that look like for the same thing? Sponsorship?
Yes, absolutely. I always tell people, like, you're pitching 6 months in advance, honestly, because look at the stores. Like, if you think about when I don't know, Valentine's Day was just over. I think before Valentine's Day was even out, they were pulling out the Easter stuff already. Right? I mean, Easter obviously is earlier this year, so that may not be the best example. But like, look at Thanksgiving, Christmas, even Halloween. Halloween, you walk out of a store and all of a sudden the Christmas stuff is up already. So you have to start being able to put that kind of content out, which means they're already thinking it, their campaigns are done. So normally, if you're looking to do something for like Thanksgiving, Christmas area, you're pitching June, July, and you probably won't hear anything till August.
No, and even the Valentine's Day content is published before Christmas.
Yes.
And they do that because they want to rank for those keywords when people actually start going out to you. So it's not complicated. It's just that you're not going to sign up to do PR or take Jenny's course or do that work if you need something tomorrow. If you need something tomorrow, you run ads. Yes. This is a long tail strategy. You're looking months out. So right now it's like the end of February. So you got March, April, May. So right now, you're looking at almost like July, like 4th of July stuff and Canada Day stuff. So don't be discouraged if you need the thing now. Look at what's happening in the next 3 to 6 months and plan your content accordingly today. And you're going to feel so much at ease too, because it forces you to be so proactive. And even with your social media content.
Yes. Absolutely.
There's nothing like being like, oh, what day is it today? Oh, it's International Women's Day. Crap, I didn't make the content for this. But if you're doing what Jenny does, if you're doing what I have to do with PR, you're already so ahead of time and involved in creating the content that it's so easy for you to do. It allows you to create the capacity also to be more creative because you're not forcing yourself to do something for the sake of doing something last minute.
Yes.
So any last words of advice or wisdom before we wrap up?
I would say I loved the way that you said throwing spaghetti against the wall, because I do think that one of the biggest things that I see, especially women, get held up on is they try to do everything to perfection before they'll jump in and actually test it and see if it works. You have to be willing to fail, but fail forward. As long as you learn from it, you're going to be able to continue to move forward. You're going to have ups and downs as someone that owns their own business. It's when you're staying comfortable that you're not going to grow. You're going to have that plateau. So if you're looking to grow, you have to take the risk to start to feel a little uncomfortable so that you can learn and continue to move and grow your business.
Ooh, I love that. Which leads me into the last question. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
That is being willing to take the risk. I think that is an entrepreneur, right? Like you have no safety net underneath you. You're putting out your genius in the hopes that others will find it, connect to it, and see that you're the expert to be able to help them answer their problem.
Yeah. Cha-ching. Okay, Jenny, if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
The best place is to head to my website, jennymelrose.com. You can find my podcast there, as well as I have opt-ins. So in other words, I will give you a pitching guide. There is also free classes that I offer. So go to jennymelrose.com. If you do have a question, since I know you can't ask me live or throw a chair at me, you can go to Instagram. It's at Jenny_Melrose and just send me a DM. I'm happy to answer any questions. And it is me in my DMs.
Love it. Okay, well, go check her out. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.